Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to my first video on this new chapter of this channel. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of content I wanted to produce, and given that a lot of the art content out there, it's kind of already been done. A lot of the categories of things that can be done has already been done. There's a lot of educational content in terms of how to make artwork, that kind of things like how to paint, how to draw, from people that actually paint and draw way better than I do. And there's a lot of content that is more podcast or interview focused. There's this stuff that me and my boys do at Lightshare, which is more on the motivational and life side of things. So I was trying to find a niche of things that I could talk about that would actually contribute to the community instead of being just like one more channel that does pretty much the same thing. It's not a jab on the other channels that do like time lapse stuff or that sort of stuff. It's just that I feel like that is already saturated, that kind of market. And also, if you are going to do something, let that be something that will actually be different and will help people out. So one one of the things that I've been missing in our industry, especially when it comes to like free content on YouTube, it's more of a design focused content where we talk a little bit more about decision making and how to think about the things that you're doing. So for this first video, what I thought of doing, and you guys let me know if it's something that you are actually interested in, but I'll take one of my projects, actually like the most recent one, that kind of F1 inspired speeder, and I want to break that down and sort of do a design analysis of that design. And initially, of course, I want to do my own designs because it will be a bit of a critique as well, and I don't want to like critique other people's stuff. But if you guys are actually super interested in this, you can send me like your own designs or designs that you're interested in me doing the analysis of, and then we can sort of study them together and try to learn from what other people do. Cool. So yeah, let's jump into this one. Okay, so what I have here, this is actually the mood board that I prepared for that project. For those of you who don't know what project I'm talking about this project right here, which is the one that has like the F1 inspired racer. So like this is the end product that we'll be doing the analysis of today. And it all started with this mood board. The goal was always to do something F1 inspired. So I was studying a lot of the like old models, and I think it's cool if you want to do something along these lines to see the story of whatever subject you are tackling, just because then you can see like the changes between each era, and also how, especially in a sport like F1, like yeah, I don't know if you guys understand what formula means in the sport, but basically means that you have a set standard of rules, and the engine is always like the same for all the cars in terms of power output and that sort of thing, like the technical aspects. And you can see how, if you study it a little bit more, how each era has a very different car because the regulations make them have to change those. So a lot of what happens, especially in this particular sport, is that engineers, they try to find loopholes, or they try to push the rules up to a limit. And whenever that happens in a manner that people think that is unfair, or like the other teams think it's unfair, they then adjust the rules to make sure that everyone is kind of competing at the same level. There's a lot of controversy around that idea of how to adjust rules and how to limit people being creative and so on. But like, that's not for us to debate here. I'm just explaining a little bit of how that works. And the changes that happen with the cars are mostly through regulations, but a lot of like, if you happen to take one set of regulations and see how the cars develop throughout that season per se, or throughout that particular period of time, you can also see that like smaller increments of changes, they compound, so that the cars at the end of that regulation period compared to the ones at the beginning, they are very different, and it's usually way more competitive when it comes to the end of that season. But then, given that we have those regulations in this sport, I was also studying like what racetracks I wanted to do, because I do have some environments on this. I was studying a little bit of like, this is more of the design of the steering wheel, but like the materials that they use. I did like some helmet designs, some pilot uniform designs as well. Like that's not showed at all. There's a lot of architectural references here of particular places, because the whole goal when you are doing a project like this should be to kind of create that universe that will support the story behind whatever design you're doing. So I think even if you are not going to show everything at the same time, or like post the entire project at the same time, it's good for you to have in mind, like in the back of your mind, all of the different aspects that surround this project. Just because, especially when it comes to something like a sport, and a vehicle, right? This vehicle doesn't exist without the sport, and the sport doesn't exist without the universe. So thinking a little bit more about the whole world that surrounds this will be way more important than like just collecting a lot of vehicle references, right? And then of course pod racing is also a reference. So there's not much to say there. It's just like super fun and something that I think inspired us all. So like I was looking at the sketches and like the scenes from the movies and all of that. And then I also collected some of, like, first of all, design, like real car design stuff, and also like some of my main references when it comes to artists and styles. These ones are more like stylistic references in terms of like how to approach the line work, how to approach the environment sketches, or like the call outs, the drawings in between each step of the project. So yeah, like this is kind of the kickoff point. And the reason why I wanted to do this project, it's mainly because I did this one drawing like ages ago. I think at this point it's been, I don't know even how many years it has been since I did this. And I always thought it was a cool idea. So I wanted to expand with that with my current skill set, instead of like just doing whatever I thought was cool back then. I think like some proportions could be improved on the design. There's also like a bunch of things that I changed when it came to this. So with all of that in mind, it's when we can jump into the actual initial sketches, okay? Now, with those references at hand, and after studying them for a little bit, like studying proportions and so on, I started to sketch these thumbnails. Now, at this point, I think it was, I don't know how many months or weeks without drawing per se. I was doing mostly 3D stuff for work, and I kind of had a hard time getting back into the groove. Like you can see that these are extremely loose, extremely poor craftsmanship. But the goal was just to get some proportions there and to sketch as many of these as possible. And I think I had like a principle of a decent idea in some of these, but there's not, like, I was trying to also explore like the cockpit position, engine position, engine shape, like some shape languages, the flow of the design. And after like maybe, I don't know how much time these took, maybe an hour to do this page, that's when I decided to take a few of these and expand them into a next page of design, which is this thing right here, this page right here, which, to be honest, is kind of okay-ish. But here, let me actually draw over these just so I can point out what is it that I'm thinking about. So I did this page here, and I think it's cool looking, but there is something that it's kind of missing from the whole F1 aspect, which is these look a little bit too alien, and also like a lot of these shapes, despite the fact that they can happen on an F1 car, they're not like as organic on the actual vehicle. And even if you're trying to push something like super organic, like this one that is basically an arch, right, with supporting lines, although it does look cool from a side view, I thought that maybe it would not be the best thing. Or something like this, where the body is like just one big shape. So if you think about this one in terms of like top view, it would kind of be like this, right? You would have the front and the back being like thinner, and then the middle part with the engine would be super wide. But I was not super happy with these designs, and I even like tried to quote unquote fix them, doing like a more grounded version of them with these ones, where I was like cutting more holes into it. I was trying to balance the shapes out a little bit more. The transitions became harder in terms of like light and dark, where the surfacing basically was changed from something super organic, which was this one, to something a little bit more grounded with like harder shapes, a little bit more of an aggressive look. And this is where I think I started to get something cool, you know? I started to understand a little bit more of what I needed to do with the project. But even then, some of the shapes, at least for me, they felt a bit commonplace when it came to the sci-fi design. And also like the proportions of some of these, looking at it right now, they're also like not super pleasant, right? So the whole point is, okay, I started with some designs and I was not actually satisfied with them. So what I did instead, I went back to the drawing board and I did what I think are the initial designs that are actually successful. They're all still proportional studies, but you can see like I'm being way more assertive with these. The drawing hand is already feeling good again. So the lines that came at this stage, they are much better looking than the ones that came before. And you can see that I'm implementing the idea of like harder edges, hard surface changes, and also like experimenting with proportions and still like playing with engine placements. Something that you can notice as well compared to the previous page is that I opted for a open cockpit instead of like the halo or the closed one. The idea behind that is that I wanted the silhouette to feel very much like an F1 car, and I feel like whenever you do something like this, it feels a lot more like a spaceship. Even though we do have the halo nowadays, and thank God that we do, because it saves like pilots' lives and stuff. I wanted to do a open cockpit, and at that point, I believe I already made a like pretty rough of, I think this one here. I think this was the one that I made it a 3D rough. And whenever I positioned the camera on the pilot position and tried to make that halo work, it was just not exactly the visual that I was looking for. So I started doing these designs here, and from here, it's when I jumped into a 3D phase. And from the 3D block out, I actually took out these designs. So let me turn off a couple of layers just so you can see what I was working on. So I basically pulled those designs, the side views, into Blender, and I did a couple of like quick blockouts. I was thinking of having as many options as possible whenever I was doing these, so I I tried to pick favorites, but also favorites that will be different enough from each other that they will actually be design options for me to study and to think about. So I took like a very blocky one, a super extra sleek one. The cool thing about this particular design, I think what was successful about it, is that it has like almost a flat line on the bottom and then like a curvature up the top, and like that balance is quite nice. I think that's the second most successful one of this lineup. Like the one that I picked, of course, I think it's more successful than that. And then like there is a like more verticalized one that is a bit more angled. So the idea was to do that, and I ended up getting to like this stage here where you basically pick your block out, you do a line art on top of it, and also a quick value breakup. The value breakup itself doesn't need to be the one that you'll use at the end. It can inspire that, but it just makes it easier for you to read the design, and also for you to think about like graphical lines along the design. Because when it comes to the F1 cars themselves, like if you look at the references that we got, they do have a nice graphical balance. And usually that graphical balance, like the balance between the red and black here on this Ferrari, like that needs to convey speed. It needs to convey like some sort of movement forward. And this is the idea behind like these designs here, right? Now, from this point on, what I did is I circled a couple of things that I wanted to implement in my design from the different designs here. But you can see like clearly there's a main one, which is like the bottom one. I think it's number 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, number 4. And that's when I jumped into 3D. Now, I will not show the full 3D process just because like the file is too heavy. What I will do instead is I will show you the sketchovers that I did while I was doing all of these designs, so that you can see like I'll kind of jump between 3D and 2D here so that you guys can understand what is it that I was doing and how I approached it. But let me just go step by step here, because I think this will be important. Okay, so I was modeling this model right here. Okay, now at the same time that I was doing this, I was also like, this is not a super finished model, but part of it, like the exterior is finished, it's just the interior is not. One thing that I wanted to do was also create a design that would make sense in a way. So it's not only that I wanted to create something that looked cool from the exterior, I wanted to create something that will at least seem functional for what we need to do. And in order to do that, you also need to create the interior. So what I did is I created this framing here, which is basically a kind of like a chassis or something along those lines that would hold every piece together. And then after I did that, I started to place in the structures from an actual F1 car mixed in with the structures from a jet engine inside of the body, right? So I modeled the exterior based on the sketches that we saw before, and then I started placing things in the interior of that body per se, of that hole, and started to basically adjust one after the other. So the interior was informed by the exterior, and then I had to adjust the exterior a little bit to adapt to whatever needed to happen inside. And I wanted to be a little bit creative as well. So you can see like this main engine part here is actually like curved, which is not something that you see like in real life. But I wanted to have like this main engine at the back. And this one is a traditional jet engine, so it has a lot of intakes. You can see that the whole intake system for this one, it's this thing right here. So we have a couple of intakes from the bottom of the car. From the side pods, we get 2 main intakes. Like this big circle here is the main intake of that engine. And then in jet world engines, you get what's called an afterburner. So basically, like whatever fuel and oxygen can be burnt after the main burning process is also like burned to create extra thrust. And I wanted to use like the top intake and the secondary side pods also to give air to the afterburner. So the whole structure of this engine is basically like that. And then I wanted to place the fuel tank kind of occupying this empty space that was covered by the body here. So we also have like the fuel tank here, and then there's the fuel pump like down here and all of that. And I wanted to just create a design that would, I put in quotes the make sense part of things just because like it's not actually really making sense, but in a made up world it does. And then one of the structures, whenever you study F1, that is actually like one of the main structures of the body of the vehicle is what's called a monocoque. So the monocoque is basically the area that encapsulates and protects the pilot, and it has like, this is the monocoque of this vehicle here, but the main goal is to protect the guy, and they carry a lot of these impact structures. So these are structures that would actually crush in the case of a crash, and protect the pilot that is inside, so they would absorb the impact, right? The main body would absorb a lot of the impact. Like the nose is actually made to break under pressure, and that's why they break so easily. And like you have structures down here that would also need to be like destructible per se, but then you have the part that protects the pilot, and inside of this part you also like have what I was planning to be the like main computing unit, and like you have the steering wheel stuff, and the pedals and all of that. So all of that was thought to be like, okay, how can I make this vehicle make sense in here, right? Like this main block here is one of the computers for the vehicle, and then you can think like, okay, what is with these side structures? And I thought that, okay, how can I make it so if you're playing this like as a video game or something, how can I make this interesting to play with, right? How can I make it actually cool to look at while it's moving? And what I thought of doing was, okay, I need to create multiple structures of control. So instead of one main engine, I thought that I could have like side engines that would also kind of be able to turn on and off and to alter their pushing power, in a sense that this way you can maybe make turning like a more interesting factor. And like I decided to make the wings have movable parts as if they were, instead of F1 wings, which are way more reactive than active, these are more like airplane wings. So they have like control systems that allows them to, like, let me show this to you guys, that allows them to move independently. So you can see there is a hinge and also a part that will like push and pull these areas to make sure that they turn with the car. So you can assume that whenever you are turning, like you're steering the wheel, and let me go to the wheel again so I can show you that. Like whenever you're doing that, you're turning this, not only is like your car slightly tilting to the side, but also every single piece of the car is helping you do that. And also like the steering wheel itself, it kind of shows a little bit more control, because not only can you rotate it, right? Not only it's a piece that you can like rotate horizontally, but also I made sure that I had extra parts here that would allow you to control these, basically like these arms right here vertically as well. So it's a mix. If you think about it, this is a mix between an F1 and a like jet, and it only makes sense to have that kind of control, because if you are mixing them visually, it makes sense for you to mix them in a like more functional way as well. And also like it was time to implement things that I just think that don't make sense in the current sport. So I don't know why people have side mirrors nowadays. If you could just like put a camera, like this is even like the entertainment sized camera, because if you were doing this in real life, I think the camera can be way smaller. But like just place a camera somewhere on your car so you can have like a wider view of everything that's happening around you, so you don't have to rely on mirrors and that sort of thing. And this is the design process behind this design. Also, for these side engines here, these are a different kind of jet engines. They're engines that don't require a fan to pull in the air. They are activated by like the air pressure that happens here. So the idea is that like this is kind of the launch off engine, the main one, and these other ones, they're only activated at after a certain speed is reached. So all of that to say that whenever you're doing the exterior of a vehicle, thinking about the interior, it's super important. And whenever we are doing the analysis of this design here, you need to think of, okay, what is it that was important and how to make it make sense from an external point of view as well, right? So now let's study this thing here. I'll take a screenshot and I will put that into Photoshop just to show you guys what I was thinking and how it all impacted the design and how I was trying to achieve certain goals, right, with this whole design. Yeah, you guys have to forgive me for not having the screenshots ready. I just think it's fine to wait a little bit. If you have not noticed that, these will be longer format videos, so only join in if you're interested in that sort of thing. I'm not a big fan of the like super short form content, so this is just a way to protest that kind of stuff, I guess. Yeah, there we go. All of these, and then let me also show the process behind stuff. So for these call out stuff, they are basically screenshots that I was taking while doing after doing the 3D and trying to understand what is it that I was doing. So a bunch of these is just like, okay, I took a screenshot of how the model looked at the time. You can see like it's way rougher than the model that I showed you, but it is just a manner of making sure that you are on track and planning stuff ahead. So like I have one from the interior there. I have the steering wheel that like you can see now that it looks pretty much like this, but when I took the screenshot, it was just like a block out shape, like very much square and so on. And then I sketched over it and just made sure that it made sense. And for these, I had the references that I just showed you guys. This is just a call out of how it works in the interior. It's basically like a spherical joint that has some actuators. So like you can measure the input that you're putting there. So whenever like you you pull or push this vertically, you will have like a different input in one of these. And then like there was this part of the interior that I don't think I sketched over this at all. Yeah, a ton of these like was stuff that I was still planning. So you can see like I had the plan of a pushing rod here, and the body was already separated from the wings. But yeah, it's just something that I never got around to properly sketch out. And then I had like the other callout page. This one is just me planning out the like the cut lines and whatever I wanted to do with some other parts, planning out the seats, how the monocoque would look like where the monocoque would interact with the frame and how those joints would happen. I still plan to like post these one day. It's just that not something that I'm giving a huge priority right now. This was me planning out how the wings would look like these front wings here. So if you can see, let me hide this other body. Like when I mentioned that the wings, they can move and have like actuators, this is what I mean by it, right? Like you have the main body of the wing, it has a hinge here. The top wings, they are just attached to this one. So the only one that actually moves is this one, and the other ones are more reactive. So you can imagine it as like one active element and two reactive ones. And when I mean reactive, it means that it reacts to the forces that are happening at that moment. So this is one of them. And then like this is how those actually work, right? Like you have let me hide this as well. You have the bodies here that push that wing upwards. And like it slides on a small little rail that you have inside here, so it pushes the back of the wing upwards. And yeah, that's kind of how that works in a made-up world. So you can see it's like half made up and half makes sense, because they are structures that would make sense. It's just that like it's not everything that is physically tested. And in order for this to work properly, you need to like to rig the model, something that I didn't do. So the next step of this journey would be like rig everything, make sure that everything is linked. So you know, when you like move the steering wheel body, things would actually move throughout the car. But that was the goal here. And this is what these callouts are for. And then what I did, it's okay, like after the design was done, it's when I started planning with like color schemes and which color schemes I wanted to make, and they were all inspired by that's why I have like a bunch of Mercedes here. It's because this is the team that I like the colors the most, so I wanted to make one of these. And like this line that I have as a motif, it's pretty much the same line that I have on mine. Like that was the reasoning behind it. So yeah, like this is what these callouts are for. They're just for myself to think of the design and to study stuff, you know. So I took my favorite models, I placed them here. I was trying to think of how to do these. This line shouldn't be here. So yeah, I think this is a little bit more behind the scenes, right? But the stuff that I was thinking throughout the process instead of things that I actually showed you guys. So now let's go to the last little bit here, the last stretch of this video. I will show you guys what I was like, the decisions that were made, and then we jump into the finals to see how these decisions affected the final design. Cool. Okay, so let me hide this one and put a layer on top that I can sketch on. Okay. Now, when it came to the side view of the design is actually extremely important, especially for a vehicle that will mostly be seen from the side. But also, like, I think this view, it conveys how aerodynamic and how the lines actually move along the design. So you can see that there's a lot of curved surfaces which is something that actually was brought in from those in very initial sketches that I told you guys that were a bit too organic, right? I think the silhouette is still very organic compared to an actual car, but you can see that the mix between organic lines and like super straight lines is what actually makes this a little bit more successful than those designs. And then not only the main lines actually talk with each other, so you can see like it starts here and then it does like a little bit of a curve up top and then it accelerates down at the bottom. And though like this particular part of the body kind of straightens out, like you can see a continuous line from here to there. And then it picks back up. And then all of these lines, they echo each other. So I have like this and then like this line up here that kind of echoes that angle. And then they continue here. So like the top part kind of continues on the wing. And then like this straight line peaks back here. And then it's pointed downwards. And then like this slope downwards is kind of the same slope as you have down at the nose. And you have a counter echo of that like here on the front wing. So this front wing kind of picks that kind of like that flow and carries to the bottom, so you can like look to the engine. And that's why you have this line down here as well, to pick that eyesight and just carry it forward. And inside of the engine itself, you have the sloping upwards line, which is just like a form brake, but also helps you carry your view forward. So the whole idea of this design is to have these big swooping lines from the front to the back of the design that will move the viewer's eyes along with the car, right? As if you are trying to look at the whole car all at once. And that's why like the side view was super important. And then these other lines here, like the brake lines, they're just meant for you to like attract more attention to those areas. So you can see, despite the fact that I have like super hard form changes here in this like main cockpit area, there's a couple of things that you can notice that like they get smoother as they move away from your focal point. And that's because you create like the hardest edges right where you want them, like your viewer, to spend the most time on. And also like these lines here, because I still wanted to convey the aerodynamic feel, they are a lot smoother, right? So we have like one form transitioning super harsh to the other, but you don't have like extremely pointy angles because you still want to make it look as if it's aerodynamic. And you only have pointy angles like at the back or at the very front, because that's where you are indicating speed, right? You're indicating intentionality of movement. Then if we come to the top view, which is this one, it's pretty much the same ideas, but now you have a little bit of a more fine-tuned shapes, because if on this one you were basically working with two lines, like exterior and interior lines, over here you are working with the lines that go across the body as well. So what is interesting, I think, to see this is that the wings, as an example, on the side view, they were pointing towards the engine, right? Something that I mentioned to you guys. So I made sure that that was happening on the top view as well. I made them just wide enough so that whenever you have the this line here that kind of creates this contour, like this organic contour, whenever this ends, it points to where the engine picks up. And that form changes that points upward here is also like pointing inwards on the top view. So it's carrying your view along the body. And you can see what I mentioned between like harder form changes and then like super soft form changes and then harder again, so that you attract attention to those areas, right? Like you can see that the final point of the engine is also like a harder edge. in terms of form transition. And you have that happening like along all of the design. Every single shape here, like all of these accelerating curves, they are actually made for me to try and guide your eye throughout the design and make sure that you are viewing it in its entirety, right? So you do have like this little stop here at the very end, so that it kind of blocks like this visually as one block, and then you have like your second block here, and then encapsulating that second block, you have the third one, which is the back wing. Back wing, same deal, right? It takes this flow and then it expands it again. So in terms of what you have visually from the top view, you have something that starts narrow and then it goes wide at the engine, and then it goes narrow again and then wide again in a uneven way, so that you have this extra nice balance, right? On the front wing, you have like two pathways that you can look at. You can have like the super straight line, or you can have the more organic flow. On the main body, you have the like this narrow line that gives it a lot of speed. And then because it becomes a wider sidewall here, what you have is basically like a slowdown of your view whenever you look at it, and then it becomes extra narrow again after it passes the cockpit. So the idea, visually speaking, of what you have happening here is that you are looking at something, you're passing your eye through this very fast, and then you slow down when it comes to the important part, which is where our cockpit is, like the area of the most interesting detail, and then you have the sense of speed again. So when I mentioned to you that I did a 3D model and the interior was informed by the exterior and vice versa, the idea was that the exterior was very important for this narrative aspect, and the interior is very important to sustain and like to support that visually. So like even because it all started with the side view, right? But because I wanted that whole wide body here, I had to come up with these secondary side pods. And even the shape of these, if you come to the Photoshop here again, they're all also supporting the main idea of the vehicle. So you have like this slope here that is like kind of tilted line, and then it slows down a little bit and then slows down again. So you have this motif of lines that are kind of converging very slowly towards the main side body here. And then this is also something that has like a varied angle, and it points to our cockpit. So all of these lines, they support the same idea. And same deal with like how they end, right? You have this top intake here that does the same motif as the body. It's narrow, wide, narrow, a little bit wide again. And then you have like the same motif, just a little bit less intense on the top line here. And down at the sides, you have lines that also support that whole body getting narrower at the end, right? So you can see like these lines, despite the fact that in 3D, the only thing that they inform, it's where the intakes will be placed. So if I hide the mirror here, you can see like the reason why this becomes narrower at this point is because that's where the intake is, right? And then this one is just, it just ends right there. It's just that you can't see how short that intake is from the exterior. So you can use the shape to like exteriorly to indicate stuff, right? And the main one is just longer because of where it's placed on the engine. So yes, the line does mean that it's pointing towards the right place and slowing your viewer's eyes here. But at the same time, it's also something that is useful on the inside. And I think that's what makes the design work in a sense. because it just means that whenever you break this thing apart, instead of being like something that doesn't make any sense at all, you can actually see how the design process was thought out through. And although this doesn't work in real life, it gives you a sense of believability, right? That's the whole point of it. And then like on the back wings here, like I made the decision on having like straighter lines on the moving parts and leaving the organic stuff to the cut lines. I think when it comes like to the top view, that's mostly it. Like you have the echoing lines here, so the parts they do like even the lines between these, right, they do become a little bit more I won't say pointy, as if it was a composition, like the cut lines here as well. Everything works to point us to the main area of the body, and then inside of the main area of the body, everything pointing towards our cockpit, so that you have your cockpit being kind of like the head of the character that is this vehicle. And when it comes to like back view, because you don't have the cockpit in the back view, right, what actually becomes important is much more of like the echoing of the shapes. So you have like a bunch of lines flowing, and you have like one big circular engine and two supporting smaller engines. You have the body doing the whole like wide and thin and wide and thin and wide again. You have a like horizontal line repeating itself throughout the design. So all of these, they are just design decisions that are made for you to like navigate your eye through this. Even like these side wings, right? They're very small. These ones are actually turn along with the steering wheel. And like another super interesting that I just saw here, and I didn't mention to you guys, these side pieces here, they're actually made to be what's it called, back thruster from the side engines. So like these would open up whenever you are slowing down or turning towards a particular side. You can see that there's the hinge here, like, which is this cylinder. Like this is where this would open up, and this would turn the cold part of this engine intake here into a forward thruster that would slow down the car. So these would move independently. You can think of like whenever you're steering, let's say to the right hand side, like the right hand side one would open and slow down that side of the car, as well as having the other side like thrusting a lot more forward, and all of the wings like moving. So in terms of a entertainment product, this is more for entertainment value rather than like actually working, right? But the idea is that imagine that the whole car moves with each movement on your controller or keyboard or whatever, whenever you're playing the game that this contains. And that makes it feel alive, right? It makes it feel as if it's a creature that is moving through the earth and through the air. So this was part of that as well. And then you have the front view, which is also like, whenever you mention creature, this kind of looks like a insect or something, because it has like this aggressive posture. It has like almost a beak-like feature. And this was also made to have like echoing lines, and then basically like big holes and gapes, as if it was opening its mouth towards you. And the back wings would support the front wings here. And you have like all of these movement that is pointing, like all of the lines point towards each other. An echo between like the top surface that looks kind of like a cobra or something, and then these lines that would go back and forth towards the front of the car. Because whenever you look at it from this position, because you can't see like the side view and how distant things are, it all becomes a graphical shape. And the balance between like narrow and wide and all of these lines kind of echoing each other, like this is what actually makes it feel cohesive from this point of view. And where I think, like graphically speaking, it's where I think this design was most successful. And it's all because of how deep it was thought from each angle, right? So whenever you're doing the 3D model, despite the fact that you do have like the whole page of sketches, like let me find where that is. It's on this, not this. Oh, it's this thing here, right? Despite the fact that you have done these, and a bunch of what I just showed you in terms of flow was thought out through like the process of sketching these ones in 3D. Whenever you keep modeling, it's where you make those decisions, right? There are things that look good here that did not look quite as good whenever I was doing the final 3D, but there's a lot of things that carried over from those, you know, like the angle of the wings, you know, that's something that was done already on the sketching phase, right? The side pods, like movement and the flow, the fact that these like smaller side pods air and intakes, they were also placed during that phase, right? The little beak at the bottom that is still like on the final design, although it changed in terms of proportions, it was all decided there. And then whenever you are approaching your final design, like they are just now working in terms of their proportions, right? And then like I didn't do the analysis of the bottom view, but like we can go over this real quick. Pretty much same deal, like flow of shapes, slowing down whenever you want it to stop. Like on the bottom is way more organic because you need to support like the rounded structure, but it's pretty much pointing towards the engine, and the cut lines are pointing towards the main cockpit area. From the bottom, it's a lot more of these, like this super straightforward flow. And then we jump into the final images, and the idea here on the final images was just to highlight the design aspects that were thought out through the initial phases that I just showed you guys, right? So I wanted images that would, as an example, like each image has a goal. The goal of this one was just to show how the, like this line, this graphical line flows from front to the back. And it's just like a nice angle to have a more diagonal angle. And you can, like on this image in particular, you can see how much the references are important, because it's kind of like the background is kind of inspired on this background here. And like all of these simple backgrounds for vehicles, with the vehicle being like the main important thing on the scene. I think that's what's important on these shots. So you have that one, and then you have like the top view. This one was made particularly to show like the flow of these shapes, and because it was lit in a very contrasty way, intentionally speaking, it's like, let me erase this. You can see very clearly all of those lines that we were studying just now, like of how they all point towards the center, and how you have like this nice organic flow of like thin and then thick and then thin again, right? How it slows down throughout here, so like you have a main light hitting here as well. How you have the front wing being lit from the top this way, and then like a darker side piece there. Like all of these were done to highlight those aspects. So even when you are rendering your design, try to think of it not only as like I want to show it from every single point of view, but also like what is the intentionality behind each view. So like this one, right, was made to highlight the proportion differences between the main engine and the side ones. and also like give some highlights towards the back wings, show like those recovery engine lights that they have in F1 nowadays, which I don't even know if it makes sense in this context, because I don't know if you have like a electrical engine that is recovering and such. But again, it's just a visual anchor towards what you have today and towards your real world references. And next design was to show like that insect looking front view of things like just flowing to each other. Same deal, lights were placed to make it look that way. So now I can jump into the 3D scene and show you guys again, but the idea was just to highlight certain shapes on this one. This is more of a narrative design looking one. So like, yeah, it's parked on a garage or something. And then you have like the main like concept arty looking ones. Like these are just front and back view angles, because yeah, it's important to have the narrative ones, but it's also important to have like the just design shot ones. And then like you have the marketing image. I just thought it would be nice to have this as like a with a more textile looking texture, and then like having that texture have the logo of the brand, like whatever. I don't know if you guys ever watched the F1 car presentations at the beginning of each season, but basically what they do is like they have the car all covered up and they pull the wraps and like they reveal the car of that season. So like this was the idea for this one, as if it was that kind of image. And then like you have the side view highlight, which highlights even more the flow of that graphical line moving along the body, which is just emphasizing that whole flow that I talked with you guys before, like that I pointed to you. And then you just have like another interior shot one highlighting the steering wheel, and where you can even see like the pedals down there. So yeah, that's kind of like the whole deal here. And just to show you guys the 3D scene, I used like my Blender file is not the most organized one, so forgive me for that. But what you can see is that each camera, like if I go to that camera view, it has a couple of lights that are attached to it. So if I turn those on, you can see like these are the lights for that particular shot, or let's say the shot number 8 here, right? This one has a bunch of different lights that are attached to it. So if I turn off all of the other lights and I turn on all of the lights there for shot number 8 and I rotate around, you can see that you have a bunch of these area lights that are placed everywhere, and then you have like a bunch of these lights here. And the goal with these, like very localized ones, because like, okay, so this one is this shot right here, so it's that front concept art looking one. This one, like the goal of all those lights is to bring up these highlights, right? So it's not as if everything is just like falls in perfectly with just one like light scheme, but you also can place localized lights to just bring up certain lines in your design. But yeah, like this is the final design. So this is the end of the video. So if you guys are interested in more of this kind of content, just let me know. And yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Let's do more design analysis. This was the first one that I did. Give me feedback on whatever you liked about the video, whatever you don't like, if it's too long, too short, or if you want me to look at the real world stuff for us to study together. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Cool.